Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of June 10th, 2024. Just to remind everyone that members of the public can be present in the council committee room during the meeting, and also the webinar will be recorded and published to the city's YouTube site. So the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Can I have someone make that? Councillor Martin and Councillor Hanson? All those in favor? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item number 2, we have the Carillon District Public Library here today. Director Sam Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor Jones.
I'll let you take the
Thank you.
Take it from here.
Thank you very much for your time, everybody, today. I just wanted to start out by thanking Mayor and Council for approving the library's 2024 budget as it was presented. And last time I was here, which was quite a while ago, somebody asked me a really good question about merchandising. And I don't feel like I took the time to thoroughly answer it. So I just wanted to start off by addressing it today. So I'm just going to quickly talk about funding, the Library Act, how fundraising is done for the library, and then UBCM and advocacy. So the library has 2 main funding sources, one being the municipality and the second being the province. I'm sure everyone has heard everyone in the library sector complain about the lack of funding from the province. This year, we're hoping to get approximately $70,000 from the province, which is an extremely minimal amount of money when you think of what it costs to run our library. And also there's a lot of reporting that I have to do for that money as well. So if I was you, I would be asking, why can't the library, sell more merchandise or perhaps charge for our programs and maybe adopt a model similar to, say, Parks and Rec. So the reason why the library is not able to do that is because we would be in violation of the Library Act. So the Library Act is overseen by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and it dictates legally what the library can and can't do. So for instance, it does say that the library is not allowed to charge for admission, services, or using materials on the premises. So that limits us to things such as charging for services, or maybe, selling t-shirts and things like that as an extra revenue stream. It also dictates when a municipality gives us the money, how it is managed. The municipality, you guys appoint a library board, and then the library board is responsible for making sure that money is transparent and responsible manner. So we also have to ensure that the municipality is provided with statements and audit, all of which in our case is actually done by the municipality. So the process is actually really transparent. So the only exception I've actually seen to this is VPL, is Vancouver Public Library. And they have a department within the library. It's a separate department that charges for in-depth research. Yeah, they're a much larger library system. They have approximately 850 staff, so they're able to do that. In terms of the gift shop, having a gift shop is really unique to our library. It's actually managed by the museum. Other libraries that might have a gift shop, it's actually managed by the Friends of the Library. So the Friends of the Library do the majority of our fundraising for us. They're very generous. For instance, this year we have $10,000 in our budget that will be spent on various library programs. In terms of advocacy, things like the UBCM is an excellent opportunity for advocacy, and it's not lost. We have got one-time funding twice actually in the last 5 years. So everyone, council's always been very, always made sure that the library has been mentioned, and for that we are very grateful. So for my next slide, if you could change it, please, Sandy. So this is just a page out of our community report. I'm not going to review it, but it's just a great example of, some of the value that the municipality and our patrons get. There's some big numbers on there in terms of programs and circulation, So if you go to our website, there is a 3-page report that just summarizes our year-end numbers, because I didn't get the opportunity to come see you at the end of the year last year. So in terms of my second quarter report, there is just 3 things that I wanted to mention, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. First is accessibility. The library is in compliance with the regulations that were put in place last year. We do have our plan up on our website. I also represent BC Library Directors on what we call PLOG, the Provincial Libraries Accessibility Working Group. And we're just entering into our second phase. So the second phase is concentrating on, there are certain standards that were put out, and the first 2 standards that are going to be addressed will be employment, as well as accessible service delivery. So I would love to be part of the city's accessibility plan going forward if possible, just because we are an integrated facility, and it just makes sense for the library to be adapting or giving input even in how people are hired and how our services are going to be delivered. And then Summer Reading Club, we just launched our Summer Reading Club program on Friday. So if you know of any school-age children, please consider asking them to register. We will be hosting programs 4 of the 5 days of the week for 6 weeks, 3 programs a week in partnership with the museum. Our theme this year is The Wonderful World of Curiosity. And all the materials for that program are provided for free for us from the provincial government. And then the third point, I just wanted to review from my first quarter report is our work with the Elk Root Conservation Society. We worked with them to launch a workshop in celebration of Earth Day. We created a workshop on native plants, and they also introduced their field guide to us. We're the first library in BC to get one. And we also created a seed library with them so people can access native seeds. And they have also suggested, should there be an appetite, they would love to create a native plant garden somewhere around the library that could be used for future programming, just to help with plant identification as well as seed collection. So I don't know if there's if the city might be interested in that partnership between the library, Elk Root. They have also offered to maybe help find funding for that as well, because they're quite passionate about it. So that's perhaps something that we can consider in the future. So that was all that I had to talk about today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Samantha.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Concern before we go?
I just wanted to say thank you for clarifying some of those revenue generation.
Yeah, but I laughed because I didn't feel like I really answered your question.
Yeah,
so
no,
it was
and you know,
good
and it
one.
makes sense, there's things that you can do and things you can't do within those restrictions.
Yeah, I think, it's, and then, one of the purposes of the act is to ensure that there's somewhere for people to go that doesn't cost anything.
Mhm.
Because the library is definitely one of the last places that, that's a possibility. And yeah, I'm very grateful that our library is well supported by our municipality, so
Mhm.
thank you.
So I noticed on your report, you have 109 adult memberships new and 10 juvenile.
Yeah.
Is that, from our community or the outlying community? Or new people to town?
So that's all people from our community.
Okay.
Yeah, people that are registered as BC1 patrons, they aren't included in those numbers.
Wow,
Yeah, we had over 500, we had 516 new memberships last year.
that's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you for your
And
time.
if there's no other questions or comments, we'll let you go. You can stay for the rest of the meeting or.
I'm gonna go enjoy the sunshine.
Thanks
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the next item on the table is item number 3, and this is the zoning bylaw amendment for the small scale multi-unit housing. And I will hand this over to Ms. Lucchini.
Thank you, your worship. Council will be aware of the provincial legislation that has now come into effect relating to small scale multi-unit housing. These changes to zoning are vast and far reaching, and over time will improve accessibility to different forms of housing at many levels. The province has imposed a deadline of June 30th for local governments to adopt amending bylaws that allow for the provisions that the province has put forward with these legislative changes. The city has been working with our planning consultants, WSP, for some time now to amend the city's zoning bylaw by the required date. Today with us is Katie Walsh, who is a senior municipal planner with WSP. And I'm going to turn things over to Katie, who's going to be giving you a brief presentation about the proposed changes that are before you and to answer questions that you might have. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me. My colleague Don MacArthur is also here on the screen as well. So yeah, I'll just go through some like a brief overview here today of the proposed amendment bylaw and summarize the legislation really briefly. We'll go through the proposed changes that you have before you to your zoning bylaw and do some Q&A at the end. And of course, feel free to jump in as we go through. I have just a couple of slides, images and tables to show you as we go, but nothing huge. So yeah, feel free to pop in with any questions as I go. So last November, the province introduced new legislation to increase their small scale multi-unit housing. People are calling it SMU and SMA. I've heard all sorts of silly abbreviations for it, but I'll probably stick with the long form. It applies across all of BC, but it's done slightly differently depending on the context. So for communities like Trail of 5 to 10,000 people, you're looking at where you've got 1 or 2 dwellings permitted, 3 or 4 dwellings are also permitted, depending on the lot size. And secondary suites or accessory suites are also permitted. So it's quite the change. And to comply with this, you'll have to amend the zoning bylaw. There's no public hearing permitted for this particular process to comply with the legislation. So it's not that you don't have to have one, it's that you can't have one. And because of that, the changes that are being proposed are only related strictly to the provision of this small scale multi-unit housing. So we haven't made additional changes that aren't related in any way. The deadline to make those changes is June 30th. So it's coming up pretty soon, but we're on track to complete that. And of course, why are we doing this? The government wants to try and address the housing crisis. So it's making more housing options available to more people. It's not going to solve everything housing related, but it is one piece of that bigger puzzle. So I'll begin with a little bit of terminology. First off, accessory dwelling unit. Some of these appear in your definitions that we've proposed to adjust. So accessory dwelling unit is a dwelling that's secondary always to a principal dwelling unit, and you've got 2 kinds. So first is a secondary suite, and this is something that's contained within the principal building. So for example, a basement suite would be a secondary suite. Accessory suite is a little different. That's a separate building from the principal building. So a garden suite or a garage suite, for example, would be an accessory suite. So accessory dwelling units, your umbrella term, these cannot be subdivided. They need a building permit. They're not included in zoning density calculations. And you can have more than one of them on a lot. So I just want to stress that it's important that people don't have to build these now that they're permitted to do them or to do more than one on a lot. It's not a requirement, it's just an option if people find that that's something that they want to do with their property. A couple more terms. Townhouse is 3 or more attached dwellings, and each one has its own entrance. It has the same meaning actually as a row house. And apartments are 3 or more units as well, but those have an entrance that's shared off of an indoor corridor. So that's the difference between a townhouse and an apartment. An apartment isn't necessarily a large building. People often think of a big, huge, multi-story building, but that's not necessarily the case. Townhouses and apartment buildings can also have accessory dwelling units on their lots too. Maybe I'll share my screen now and show just a couple of images. Okay, can you see that? Yep. Okay, so just a few pictures around. So on your top left is a fourplex. So you've got two dwellings in the front facing the street, and then you'd have two in the back. Below that, at the bottom, that's another fourplex, but in the streetscape of what's currently single detached dwellings. So it's a little bit bigger, a little bit closer to the footpath, but not a huge difference. It's different, but and then you've got a garage suite here. So you've got your apartment above the garage at the bottom. This one looks like it's entirely used as a house. I don't know if there's much garage car parking happening there. And then this is an example of a laneway house. You can see the principal building at the front there behind in this case, behind the laneway house there. So it's just a few examples of what that might look like. So moving into the zones, as I mentioned before, the new legislation requires that 3 and 4 units and accessory dwelling units be permitted in residential zones. So this requires a change to some of the residential zones in trail zoning bylaw. So what we've done is combine a few of those zones. So right now you've got zones R1 and R2. We've combined those into R1, which we've proposed calling large lot residential. And then zones R3 and R5 are combined, and we've called those R3 small lot residential. The reason we've combined these is because after these new uses were permitted, the 2, 3, and 4 unit dwellings, the zones became then almost the same. So they only have very minor differences, if any, between them. So for example, R3 had a slightly smaller setback than R5. And there aren't too many R5 properties, so you won't see a big difference then between them. Excuse me. The main difference now between the proposed R1 and the proposed R3 is the density in R3 would be a little bit higher than what's allowed in R1 as your lots got bigger. So I'll show you another slide. This is the zone that we're proposing. The current zones are here on the left, R1 through R5. R4, by the way, is staying the same. We haven't proposed any changes for that. So R1 large lot residential up to 280 meters squared. This is the legislative requirement, allows up to 3 units on a lot. If it's larger than 280 meters squared, you'd have 4 units on a lot, or if it got larger, you'd calculate it per hectare. So it would be 45 units per hectare. So you wouldn't see more than 4 units on a lot until your lot got to be about 11 or 1200 square meters. So you're really not going to see that. The most you'd really see would be 4. Small lot residential, same thing, 3 units for 280 meters squared, 4 units for over 280 meters. Again, unless it got to be a larger lot, then you're looking at a higher density than what you would have in the R1. So that's really the big difference between the two. But again, it's only applying to situations where your lot is quite a bit bigger than, in this case, it would be 500 square meters that you'd start to see more than 4 units on a lot. Accessory dwelling units then are on the right. So you allow 3 accessory dwelling units. So that could be an accessory suite or a secondary suite per lot for the smaller lots, and 4 or 1 per principal dwelling unit on the larger ones. Same thing for the small lots. That's really the main essence of what's being proposed for the changes to the residential zones.
Katie?
Yeah.
Just as a 280 square meters, would that be your 25 by 100 foot lot? As far as I know that you've got it metric, but I was just trying to think about lot size.
Yeah. Sorry, it's all metric. I think that's about right. Yeah, it's like the smaller one. Maybe I'll ask Don in the background if he could calculate that, if it's the 25 by 100. So don't have it off the top of my head, and we'll get back to that. Is that all right?
Sorry, Kate.
Mhm.
No problem. Okay, so all the other zones have stayed the same. So R4 and then R6, all the rest of the residential zones, and then the commercial and industrial and so on, they haven't changed. So it's really just these ones. I'll list a few more changes in support of the small scale multi-unit housing that aren't strictly about large lot size. We have reduced a few of the setbacks to those front, side, and rear yards, and also allowing a little bit of projection into setbacks for decks and stairways and that kind of thing, just to allow a little more flexibility for that housing to be built. The lot coverage allowance has increased a little bit to allow, again, a little more space for those units. We have proposed increasing the height limits in the new R1 and R3. So the height limit for R1 would be 3 stories, and we were suggesting R3 be 4 stories. I know that's quite a bit of a change. The reason for this is because a lot of that land is on that hillside, and you're quite restricted what you can do with the lot as your property goes up the hill. So if you don't have the opportunity to build right across your property, maybe you could go upward and have that opportunity to build vertically instead. So that's the thinking with that. The home occupations clauses are a little more permissive, so you'd be allowed to have more than one per dwelling unit on a lot, and also have those permitted in accessory dwelling units too. And parking. So we looked at the parking and adjusted that slightly too, to sort of try and balance meeting parking needs without providing an excess amount of parking, and acknowledging too that in some areas of trail, particularly in West Trail, you've got some constraints, excuse me, with narrow streets, and so on-street parking might not necessarily be an option. So what we're looking at is 1 space per dwelling unit for 3 bedrooms, 1.5 spaces for 4 or more bedrooms, and then that would go for whether it's a single detached, a 2-unit, or a townhouse. That would apply. So it will be tied to the number of bedrooms or the size of the unit and the likely number of people that you would have in a unit. Apartments would be 1 per dwelling unit, and then would retain that 0.5 per dwelling unit in the commercial 1 zone. Accessory dwelling units, we're looking at 1 for 2 dwelling units or less, and then half a space for each additional one. So I'll put a little table together here too for that. So on your left, you've got the number of principal dwelling units. So say you had, and then parking spaces for up to 3 bedrooms. So with parking, you round it up. So for 3 bedrooms, it's just 1 per unit. So 1 unit has 1 parking stall, 2 has 2, and so on. For 4 bedrooms, it goes up a little bit more. So for 1 unit, you'd have 2, but then for 2 units, you'd have 3. So if you had, say, on 1 lot, you had 2 2-bedrooms, 2 2-bedroom units, you'd have 2 parking spaces for that. And if you had 1 4-bedroom, you'd have 2 parking spaces for that. So it would be 4 spaces for your 3 units. So that's sort of what we're looking at here. I don't want to dwell too much on this because it can get a bit nitpicky or confusing. A couple of things we're proposing to remain restrictive. So for bed and breakfast, you still can't have a bed and breakfast in combination with an accessory dwelling unit, and you can't have a bed and breakfast contained within an accessory dwelling unit either. Short-term rentals, we've kept those the same. Those require a rezoning for a site-specific use, and the process is the same, so that hasn't changed. Then we've got the maps. Those have changed as well. We have proposed now, it's just the 1 map of 9 maps. So A1 is kind of like your key, and then you've got close-ups of all the different sections of the city, and we've color-coded it as well in hopes that it's a little bit more legible. So I had a few parking stalls. Yes, all of this here. I'll show you the maps.
Great.
Can you still see my screen there? Yeah, okay. So this is map A1 and it's basically the legend of all the maps. So you've got A2 through A9 showing all the different sections of trail. And then, for example, schedule A6 here, that's this one. Then you can zoom right in and see all the different properties and have it color coded, so it's a little bit easier to follow. Those are the changes. And you can see we've got R3 all along here in West Trail and R1 up in this corner here. That's largely where a lot of the changes have occurred, where those properties were. So I guess that's really the long and the short of it. I just want to sort of restate that people aren't required to make the changes here to their property, and so things aren't going to change overnight. You'll start to see some gradual changes slowly over time, and that's in hopes of trying to start to address some of that housing need that you might be facing in Trail for some rental properties or smaller properties, whatever the need may be. This will over time have some impact on infrastructure. And upgrades obviously will be needed over time. So it's something to just start thinking about now. But yeah, just to keep that in mind. And for next steps, once this is once council chooses to amend this bylaw, we'll consolidate it all together, and then there won't be any more public hearings on amendments that conform to your adopted OCP, but you do have to look at updating that OCP by the end of the year, which we're working on. So that's the end of next year. So you have still another year and a half to complete that. So that's in line with the legislation too.
Great.
So that's a bit of a summary on that. Yeah, if there are any questions or anything, or if Don got the answer to that question about the lot sizes, yeah, feel free to ask away.
Yeah, and I just threw that in the chat box there. But just to answer that question, Colin, the lot size of about 30 by 100 is what you're looking at for 280. So precisely, it's 279 square meters is a 30 by 100 foot lot. So if it's a 30 by 100 foot lot, it's under 280. If it's a lot larger than that, it's over the 280 square meters. So that's kind of where that 30 by 100 lot is the dividing line that the province chose.
Thank you.
Okay, does council have any questions?
So just a couple of things. Thanks for the great work on that, you guys. I've attended a lot of these webinars. And I'm happy to see, these changes that will be made. What is the plan? And maybe this is a staff question, for pre-existing units. So we have so many grandfathered suites that have been around since forever. Now, will that change, or will they just automatically fall into where this sits? Do they then now need to, because maybe some of them don't have appropriate fire rating and don't have, so they've been an unauthorized suite per se. So how does that, if they now will be in compliance with the zoning, are they then authorized? Because they would have been something pre-existing before they were built. So to the standard of when they were developed may not be as to the standard as if they were to be applied with building code today. So how does that apply? Do they automatically just get approved into the legal suite category? Or do they then have to apply, have an inspection to then be in compliance or not be in compliance when they were pre-existing before the zoning change?
My understanding, Councillor Hanson, is that if you are non-conforming because of the actual location or not being allowed, you're there, that certainly would be something that, okay, it's now allowed there, you're qualified. Most of those that are non-qualified is because they don't have egress there, they don't have fire separation between furnace and space, or they don't have windows to get out of. I would say to you that that would still qualify as non-conforming because it is not a suite that fits those criteria. I don't think we can get away from the life safety component, but again, if they were just there because they were grandfathered before the law came in and said that there wasn't any secondary suites there, but they had one, and they were allowed to continue on, then that would be fine. But I think that anything that you're dealing with on the life safety side, they would need to,
Be in compliance.
compliance to be, or, recognized as a legitimate secondary. That would
Okay,
be my understanding.
okay, no, thank you, I appreciate that. And then, in regarding to infrastructure, I mean, I know we have some aged infrastructure, and so is there going to be a plan made to consult with our public works to see where areas might be of priority based on where these are gonna get potentially built? Because if you've got aged infrastructure in West Trail and now someone can build a 3 unit plus 3 suites, so 6 units, that's a huge change in our infrastructure capacity.
Yes, and it's one of the challenges that I believe most municipalities have gone back to the province on, is exactly that, and, you have, spaces that were built and sized for a certain number of dwelling units, and then you add this many, that there could be issues. I think, as the consultants have noted, was, yeah, likelihood is this isn't happening overnight. Right, so, but yes, I think that that goes back also to the asset management planning component of, not just looking at what's already undersized, but I think getting a sense of what is the plan as we look out on, what is the material that we're using? I mean, my understanding is we still have some wood stave sewer pipes and things like that. So, those are sorts of things that are gonna be probably higher on the list depending on what we're using. But I think that it's gonna be an encompassing, as we get the asset management component done, as we start to see what happens over the next year or so, interest rates are maybe coming down a bit here. Will that encourage people to do some of the building work that needs to be done? And will that be something that we will actually add into the asset management, saying, well, we look like we're gonna have some lots here that have been sold and some additional things happening. What are we doing about infrastructure? What is, I get a little bit nervous about it happening, and all of a sudden you're kind of dealing with things because of a necessity rather than sort of planning. You're more reactionary as things coming onto the piping. But I think they're gonna be in whole, but it's very intuitive as you're thinking about, okay, if we've got items here, what might happen if we've got lots selling? It's gonna be a conversation we're gonna have, and as we've spoken before, we're already behind, I would say, on a lot of our infrastructure. So it is a good question, and I think that that's where, if you are having sort of these new units coming on from where there previously wasn't, or wasn't maybe at the same value, that you would hope that we would start looking at, okay, so we're getting additional funding now, taxation, for having a smaller or more density on a smaller property. I think that that's where some of the decisions making is gonna be, like, well, we need to maybe be pushing some of that into our infrastructure. As well as
Funding.
those units should be able to be charged at higher rates for, or like multiple rates, because there's multiple users of the infrastructure there. That would be, I think, what we're gonna be looking at. I will be curious to see, even from what response WSP has on, what is the province looking at, what kind of changes are going to be implemented. And as we gather over the next couple of years through our conferences on what people are doing to try to stick handle the ability of I'm thinking in, certain areas like in Sunnydale, where you've got large lots, and then all of a sudden now you're able to go and put, 4 units on it, but that pipe going there, who pays, who benefits? Yeah, it's a very good question.
I'm almost done. I have
No,
two more questions, and then I'll
Yes.
wrap it up. One, reviewing the zoning bylaw, that was there, I didn't note anything about maintaining or improving the look of the neighborhood, right? And I mean, I think that would be something thoughtful as we review, or the city reviews applications for building in these areas. You want to always maintain or improve the look of your neighborhood, and a lot of areas in Trail do not have building schemes registered on them. So I think we should be, cognizant of adding some sort of verbiage that it maintains or improves the look of the neighborhood or the feel of the neighborhood, just to maintain there's a consistent appreciation of value that, a neighbor, you've got $1 million brand new home in Mural Heights, that's all, custom everything. And then someone pops up something with vinyl siding that's just been, put together, just something to maintain a value. And I think that would be something that I think the neighbors and residents around those areas would be cognizant and appreciative of.
Katie, would kind of throw something like that back to you. I don't know, really, if you own the lot and it's within, as long as the building inspection of met the the current requirements for building, I don't think that we would have a lot of ability to do that, but I don't, Katie, would you have any advice for us on those sort of questions that are coming from Councilor Hanson?
Yeah, so the development permits are an opportunity to do that, and it's probably something we'd have as a broader conversation in the OCP. I don't know it's something we can introduce into the zoning bylaw at the moment. Don, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, when we look at your OCP later this year, that's somewhere where we can look at the form and character of neighborhoods and ensuring that that's maintained.
Yeah, because I think, you know, the policy guidebook that I reviewed is that we're supposed to take it into consideration. Not
Yeah.
necessarily that needs to be taken verbatim. So
Yeah.
if there is an opportunity to do that, I think it would be very reassuring to the neighbors of wherever these are developed, that there's consistency in the neighborhood to at least maintain or improve the feel and look of the neighborhood.
Yeah, and if I may add, Katie's absolutely right. Like development permit guidelines are specifically for that, for form and character. So when we update the official community plan as we move through that process over the next year here, that would be the time to look at that. Development permit guidelines, I should mention though, are for multifamily, right? So it wouldn't take into account single family. It wouldn't take into account 2-unit dwellings. If someone is building a carriage suite or a garden suite, those wouldn't normally be regulated through development permits, but certainly townhomes and apartments could be. And so if council so chooses, and if the public is supportive of that idea, then that's something we could introduce. And of course, that's quite common across municipalities in BC to have form and character development permits for multifamily.
And my last question
No.
is that, is there going to be a communication plan? Because I feel like people kind of heard about a thing and legislation changing, but what does that actually mean? So can we work with Claire potentially to develop a communication plan on what that means for you in your neighborhood? So that people aren't blindsided that all of a sudden someone's got a triplex going up beside them and they're going, "Oh, I never knew this was happening." I think if we're ahead of the curve and giving some, you know, even little mini workshops or webinars or something that we can at least give some people information, I think it's better to have people knowing that this is a change that's happening, and, you know, you're not gonna come here and there's not gonna be a hearing, and knowing that that's now part of the new process.
Certainly, we could do that, and I would suggest that there's going to be a lot more communication just with this whole work with the OCP as we go through our committee and we start having the stakeholder engagements and having those kinds of conversations. So I think that's going to be a good time to communicate to those individuals that, again, are interested. It never surprises me when we do the best we can with whether it's a letter to your door or ad on Facebook or the paper, and someone says, "I never do," and I'm always a bit surprised, but it happens. But yes, it's a great, idea. I think that as this rolls out, that would be something that we can certainly have a communication as we get through the process of adopting this before the 30th, and then I can see a communication campaign from there. But I also believe it's going to be really dovetailed in with OCP and getting that out to the word out to the community, and having people that are wanting to engage with us, because that's what we really hope for stakeholders. Again, also a reminder that this is something that came from the province. This isn't something that just all of a sudden the City of Trail Council decided to allow you to put a triplex on a building sort of thing. So yes, absolutely.
That's all.
And I'm just wondering too, Dawn and Katie, if you wouldn't mind, that whole question on infrastructure, was curious on your side, because you probably have your ear on the ground of other municipalities, and is there anything, again, I think the province is actually looking at some items, but I was curious on whether or not you had any feedback for us.
So the first thing that comes to mind is the development cost charges bylaw option. So it's something that if the City of Trail doesn't have one, I don't know that you do, is something you could look at, where you're costing out what your likely needs will be in the future, and then you can embed that into the cost of development as it occurs, and you can start looking at your new development, your new fourplexes and so on, contributing to that long-term infrastructure maintenance and upgrades so that it's keeping up with that population growth. There's also an amenity cost charge that looks at other sort of kinds of infrastructure like libraries and parks and so on. So that would help with that too. Yeah, anything else that you might have to add, Dawn?
Yeah, and other than that, like I'm also working with a municipality that they've decided that the homeowners who want to do this are going to pay. So if you don't have a water pipe on your block that's can support a triplex, then you're going to be paying to upgrade that pipe to the corner so that it does have the capacity. But obviously that will probably hinder development and housing because if you get stuck with a $50,000 or $100,000 bill, that might make that triplex not worthwhile doing. So whether that's the right approach is a question, but it's certainly an option. You always have that as an option if there isn't the capacity in a neighborhood, if Public Works says we don't have the capacity on this block, you always have the ability to prevent that from moving forward by or at least putting that onto the person who's proposing it, right? So like I say, may not be the right option, but it is an option for you that some municipalities will probably be utilizing. And then as Katie mentioned, this is a gradual change, right? So infill housing doesn't usually happen very often because most homeowners are living in their home. They don't want to tear it down to build a triplex, or they might not have the financial capacity to add a secondary suite or an accessory suite, et cetera, right? And so this will happen slowly over time. And so that does give you the opportunity to look at your budgeting processes, your 5-year financial plan, and potentially increase the amount of money that is being allocated to water, sewer, and stormwater, specifically those 3 items, right? But also other items such as parks and Katie mentioned amenities, right? If you have a growing population in a particular area, maybe you need additional amenities over time, right? So whether it be recreation facilities or otherwise. So that would be a suggestion as well, as to budget for it over the next 20 years, right, in your 5-year financial planning. And then of course there's grant applications. That's one that can be difficult, of course, for smaller municipalities. Because you have to have the capacity to put in the application in the first place, and then you're also competing against larger municipalities that may have dedicated staff to doing grant applications, and may be very organized at doing that, or very experienced at those successful applications. So I know grant applications aren't always the best solution, but that's certainly another option as well. So yeah, it's not going to be one solution. There's probably a combination of all of those things. I know when I brought up DCCs at the meeting we had just before Christmas, it didn't seem like it was a popular thing to mention, but development cost charges are something that do exist in other municipalities, and that is one of the ways that other municipalities are going to be funding some of these infrastructure changes over the next 10 to 20 years.
Thanks, Mike. And again, I assume that will be part of the conversation as part of our OCP. That we will have more and stakeholder engagement on questions like that.
Yeah, I think that was going, whether these changes were happening from the province or not, infrastructure planning is part of an OCP update process. And so definitely we'll be having those conversations, not only with Public Works and council and staff, but also with the public, right? So, yeah.
Thank you, Connie.
I just wanted to comment that I just got back from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention, and this topic came up several times as speakers spoke, and the cost of the infrastructure they're excited about the change in the bylaws because they need the housing, but it was the cost of the infrastructure in smaller communities in quite a few provinces across Canada, where they were already advocating and approaching the government for grants and money to help with the infrastructure, because it's going to affect them. They have the smaller tax base, right? So it's going to be so much more expensive for them. So those grants are going to be coming. hopefully, you know, over time, like you said, this will take a while, but, you know, we just have to make sure, excuse me, make sure that we're looking for them. Counselor Hanson, did you have your hand up again?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so if there's no more questions, oh, Counselor Martin, go ahead.
Does the city have an idea, obviously, with the, that's something that Councilor Hanson brought up earlier. For the suites, they're non-compliant with the new regulations that are moving forward. The city must know where these are throughout the city, correct? Or no?
No, we sometimes have become aware,
Yeah,
but
so,
we don't have a robust staff member that's
Yeah.
checking like larger communities.
so then another question, who's gonna be responsible for following up or trying to find these? Cause people who are gonna be charged accordingly when they start doing these things on their property, they're gonna want everybody to be at the same level, right? And will there be a grace period for these folks who, when we do find out where they are, will or will that be discussed with the OCP?
And again, a lot of times we find these things out by mistake or change of homeowner, hey, I wanna, and like, oh, we don't have that on file. You've been kind of going for 10 years of
Yeah.
not having a secondary suite, and so now we need to add that, and oh, you know, so that happens sometimes, but. I don't really have an answer for you as far as us going out and looking for those. I think it would be something that would be difficult, I think, and time consuming and resource consuming. But we do have, you know, our list right now of ones that pay for that. And so again, you're always hoping that if someone's doing something like that, that they would, you know, pay into the system that they're using, but we can't. It is sort of a by complaint and or by someone coming along and saying, hey, I've got this, and then we're like, oh, we didn't know that, you're not on our list for that. And then sometimes quite innocent. Yeah, and then we just work with them to say, okay, well, we need to now install that and like, put it going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Counselor Hanson.
I was just gonna say further to that, to Councilor Martin, I mean, and some of these we have to look at if you're looking for things that are like a life safety situation that were just pre-existing. A lot of these were built as in-law suites years and years ago, and if it's the same family living within it, then it doesn't have to be.
No.
Right, so it's just a matter of what the use is, if it's got 2 secondary uses, or if they're renting it by room, then there's a different situation altogether again, then. So it's very, you know, there was one place that had 3 units and it's been that way since 1967 and the city had no idea. And they're like, well, it is what it is. It's been this way for so long. It's not like we're gonna do anything now. But there's, you know, different situations with them too.
Okay. If there's no more questions, are you guys ready for the recommendation? Okay, so the recommendation is before you, and it is that council consider the required readings of zoning amendment by law number 2944, 2024 at the June 10th, 2024 regular meeting. Councilor Benson, Councilor Martin, all those in favor? Thank you, carried unanimously. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
We'll see you soon, I guess, at our first OCP meeting. Okay,
Yeah, we'll
we're gonna
be
move
there in a
on to
couple
the
weeks.
next. Yes, yes, thank you. We're going to move on to our next item on the agenda. And that is our grant and aid sponsorships. So the first one is 4.1, and it's the Trail and District Art Council. And a request for rental waiver in the amount of $680. And that's for table and chairs. Councilor Benson, Councilor Martin, thank you. All those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Kootenai South Métis Society, a request for rental waiver, and that is in the amount of $268.15. Councilor Hanson? Councilor Butler? All those in favor? Thank you, carried unanimously. 4.3 is the Sisters of Colombo, and it is a request for rental waiver as well. And this is to support the Sisters of Colombo in their 100th anniversary gala. And that is in the amount of $2,000,
Well, that, there's
a little amendment there.
they have indicated 2,000 up to, but the rental right now is at $1,673.25. However, they haven't factored in whether overtime will be required,
Right.
so it could get up towards that $2,000 range. Actually.
Okay, thank you,
Welcome.
Sandy. Okay, Counselor Hanson? Counselor Cashel? Thank you. And that is for up to $2,000. Okay. All those in favor? Thank you, carried unanimously. Item number 5 is a resolution to adjourn the Governance and Operations Committee portion of the meeting and immediately resolve into in-camera meeting. And that is as per the Community Charter Section 91A and the Communities Charter Section 91L. All those in favor? Councilor Benson, Councilor Martin, thank you. Carried unanimously.